December 17th, 1944, 0530 hours, Elsenborn Ridge, Belgium. Through the pre-dawn darkness that shrouded the Ardennes forest, the rumble of diesel engines and clanking tracks announced the approach of what German intelligence believed would be their moment of triumph. SS Oberfuhrer Wilhelm Mohnke's 1st SS Panzer Division, spearhead of Operation Wacht am Rhein, advanced with supreme confidence toward what appeared to be a lightly defended American position. 12 massive King Tiger tanks, each mounting the devastating 88mm gun and protected by armor up to 180mm thick, led the assault. Behind them rolled Panther tanks and mechanized infantry, the elite of the Waffen-SS prepared to punch through American lines and race toward Antwerp. The mathematical certainty seemed absolute. Intelligence reports indicated minimal American resistance, perhaps a company of infantry, maybe a few anti-tank guns, certainly nothing that could stop the most powerful tanks ever deployed in combat. The King Tiger's gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Its frontal armor was impervious to every weapon in the American arsenal except at point-blank range. German tank commanders peered through their periscopes at the snow-covered ridge ahead, calculating firing solutions for targets they expected to obliterate within minutes. Yet within 6 hours, the entire SS spearhead would be stopped cold, not by superior numbers or better equipment, but by something German doctrine had never anticipated: a handful of American tank destroyers and a single company of Sherman tanks that refused to retreat. The morning mist that had concealed German movements would lift to reveal a killing ground, where elite Waffen-SS troops lay scattered across Belgian snow. 12 King Tigers would sit burning or abandoned, their crews dead or fled into the frozen forest. By nightfall on December 17th, the entire northern shoulder of Hitler's last great offensive would collapse not from overwhelming force, but from the stubborn resistance of outnumbered Americans who turned tactical disadvantage into strategic victory. What unfolded at Elsenborn Ridge wasn't just a tactical defeat, it was the systematic demolition of German military confidence. The shocked survivors would discover they hadn't been fighting a rearguard action. They had encountered the birth of modern defensive warfare, where terrain, communication, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to yield could stop the most powerful armored force ever assembled. The mathematical certainty of German victory had collided with American determination, and mathematics had lost. The German plan for Operation Wacht am Rhein embodied Hitler's personal fantasy that superior technology and warrior spirit could reverse Germany's deteriorating position. Conceived in the Führer's mind during sleepless nights in the Wolf's Lair, the operation represented Nazi Germany's last desperate gamble to split the Western Alliance and force a negotiated peace. The plan demanded nothing less than a complete breakthrough of Allied lines, the capture of Antwerp, and the encirclement of British and Canadian forces. The 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, represented the cream of German armored forces, the political and military elite of the Nazi state forged into a fighting instrument. These weren't ordinary Wehrmacht soldiers, but true believers in Nazi ideology, hand-picked for their fanatical loyalty and combat prowess. SS Oberfuhrer Wilhelm Mohnke, commanding the division, had fought in every major German campaign, from Poland to Normandy. His men wore the Death's Head insignia with pride, considering themselves the guardians of Hitler's 1,000-year Reich. Their equipment matched their elite status. The King Tiger tank, officially designated Panzer 6B Tiger II, existed nowhere else on Earth. Each tank weighed 68 tons, more than 2 Sherman tanks combined. Its frontal armor, sloped at optimal angles, reached 180 millimeters of hardened steel that no Allied weapon could penetrate, except at suicidal ranges. The main gun, an 88mm KWK-43L71, could destroy any Allied tank at distances where return fire was impossible. German intelligence assessments reinforced confidence in inevitable victory. The Ardennes sector appeared to be held by inexperienced American divisions. Green troops recovering from earlier battles or preparing for their first taste of combat. Aerial reconnaissance reported minimal fortifications, sparse artillery concentrations, and road networks that couldn't support rapid reinforcement. Wehrmacht planners calculated that a determined SS assault would punch through American lines within hours, opening the road to Antwerp and ultimate victory. SS tank crews had trained extensively throughout the autumn of 1944, perfecting the tactics that had conquered Europe. They practiced breakthrough operations in East Prussian training grounds, mastering the coordination between tanks, infantry, and artillery that had proven devastating from Warsaw to Paris. Their doctrine emphasized aggressive assault, rapid exploitation of success, and the psychological impact of elite troops appearing where the enemy least expected them. Unknown to the advancing Germans, their intelligence had failed catastrophically. The Americans occupying Elsenborn Ridge represented something entirely different from the inexperienced troops German planners anticipated. The 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions had been bloodied in the Hurtgen Forest, where they learned bitter lessons about German tactical superiority and developed countermeasures that German doctrine couldn't comprehend. These American defenders possessed something German intelligence couldn't quantify: institutional knowledge, born from months of combat against the Wehrmacht's best units. They had faced German tanks before, survived German artillery, and learned to exploit German tactical weaknesses that Prussian military tradition refused to acknowledge. The quiet Ardennes sector hadn't been chosen for recovery but for preparation, as American commanders built defensive systems specifically designed to channel and destroy German armored attacks. The American defensive system at Elsenborn Ridge revealed tactical innovations born from months of combat against German armor superiority. Rather than attempting to match German tanks gun for gun, American commanders had embraced a revolutionary concept: the prepared defense that turned geography into weaponry. Every slope, every tree line, every depression in the ground became part of an integrated killing system designed to channel German attacks into predetermined zones of destruction. Colonel Gene Scott's 624th Tank Destroyer Battalion embodied this uniquely American military philosophy that German doctrine couldn't comprehend. Armed with M36 tank destroyers mounting 90mm guns, these units represented the antithesis of German thinking. Where Germans built heavier tanks to counter heavier tanks, Americans created specialized tank killers that emphasized concealment, mobility, and devastating firepower from carefully prepared positions. The tank destroyer crews had spent weeks studying the terrain around Elsenborn Ridge, identifying every position that offered fields of fire while providing protection from German return fire. They practiced rapid displacement drills that would allow them to fire 3 or 4 rounds before moving to alternate positions, making German counter-battery fire ineffective. Each M36 carried 47 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition capable of penetrating King Tiger frontal armor at ranges up to 800 meters under optimal conditions. Artillery forward observers, positioned throughout the ridge, represented another American innovation that German intelligence had failed to appreciate. These specialists, equipped with powerful radios and precise maps, could call down devastating barrages from multiple battery positions within minutes of target identification. The 105th Field Artillery Battalion, supporting the defense, had pre-registered every likely German approach route with mathematical precision. Communication networks binding the defense together exceeded anything German forces possessed. Telephone lines buried beneath the frozen ground connected every defensive position to central command posts. Radio nets linked tank destroyers, artillery observers, and infantry units in real-time coordination that enabled instant response to developing threats. When German attacks materialized, information flowed through these networks faster than German tactical doctrine could adapt. The integration of weapons systems demonstrated American tactical sophistication, that German planners consistently underestimated. Tank destroyers provided long-range anti-armor capability. Artillery delivered area denial fires that channeled German movement. Infantry occupied positions that prevented German troops from closing with American guns. Anti-aircraft units positioned to engage German close air support also provided devastating direct fire against ground targets. Most critically, American defensive doctrine emphasized flexibility over rigid adherence to predetermined plans. Unit commanders received mission-type orders that specified objectives while allowing tactical freedom in execution. When situations changed rapidly, American forces could adapt without waiting for higher headquarters approval, creating response times that consistently exceeded German tactical decision cycles. The psychological preparation of American forces proved equally important as their tactical innovations. Unlike German troops trained to expect easy victory through superior equipment and warrior spirit, American defenders understood they faced overwhelming odds but possessed advantages their enemy didn't recognize. They had studied German tactics extensively, identified systematic weaknesses, and developed specific countermeasures that turned apparent German strengths into critical vulnerabilities. Training conducted throughout November and early December 1944 had focused specifically on engaging German heavy tanks under disadvantageous conditions. American crews practiced target identification techniques that enabled rapid engagement of German armor weak points. They rehearsed ammunition selection procedures that maximized penetration against heavily armored targets. Most importantly, they developed confidence that determined defenders utilizing proper tactics could defeat technically superior attackers. The actual engagement revealed fundamental flaws in German armored doctrine when confronted with prepared American defenses. At 0600 hours on December 17, the 1st King Tigers crested the lower slopes of Elsenborn Ridge, their commanders confident they would sweep aside token American resistance within the hour. What they encountered instead was a killing ground, carefully prepared over weeks of methodical planning. The terrain itself became America's greatest ally. Elsenborn Ridge rose nearly 200 feet above the surrounding forest, its slopes covered with dense pine trees that channeled attacking armor into narrow corridors. German tanks, designed for rapid maneuver across open ground, found themselves confined to predictable routes where American defenders held overwhelming advantages. The steep inclines forced King Tigers to expose their thinner belly armor as they climbed, creating vulnerability windows that alert tank destroyer crews exploited ruthlessly. American artillery demonstrated devastating effectiveness against massed German armor, advancing across predetermined fire zones. The moment German tanks entered the engagement area, forward observers called down time on target missions that brought shells from 6 different battery positions arriving simultaneously. The psychological impact proved as destructive as the physical damage. German tank crews, accustomed to operating with artillery support, discovered they were the targets, rather than the beneficiaries, of massed indirect fires. Lieutenant Robert Billings, commanding a platoon of M36 tank destroyers positioned on the reverse slope of Hill 412, engaged the lead King Tiger at a range of 700 meters. His first shot penetrated the German tank's frontal armor just below the gun mantlet, igniting ammunition that blew the turret completely off the hull. Before the German formation could respond, Billings' tank destroyer had displaced to an alternate firing position, leaving German return fire to impact empty ground. The engagement demonstrated the tactical superiority of prepared positions over mobile firepower. German King Tigers, forced to halt and engage targets they couldn't clearly identify, became stationary victims for concealed American gun. Tank destroyer crews, firing from carefully surveyed positions with pre-calculated range cards, achieved first-round hits at distances where German crews struggled to acquire targets through forest and smoke. Individual acts of heroism multiplied defensive effectiveness throughout the morning engagement. Sergeant James Morrison, manning a 57mm anti-tank gun, remained at his position despite direct machine gun fire from German infantry. Morrison's gun crew destroyed 2 Panther tanks at ranges under 400 meters before German infantry overran their position. Morrison's sacrifice bought precious minutes for other defenders to adjust their fires and coordinate supporting attacks. The integration of obstacles with direct fire weapons created tactical combinations that German doctrine had never anticipated. American engineers had felled trees across likely tank approaches, forcing German armor to slow or detour into prepared kill zones. Anti-tank mines, positioned to channel rather than merely destroy, guided German movement toward positions where American guns held decisive advantages. When German tanks attempted to bypass obstacles, they exposed their flanks to concealed tank destroyers, firing from positions German reconnaissance had never identified. Communication superiority enabled American defenders to mass fires against individual German targets with devastating effect. When Corporal David Chen's tank destroyer crew spotted a German command tank identifiable by its additional radio antennas, Chen immediately reported the target to higher headquarters. Within 90 seconds, artillery observers had bracketed the German vehicle with white phosphorus shells, while 3 different tank destroyer platoons engaged from multiple directions simultaneously. The German command tank, overwhelmed by coordinated fires it couldn't effectively return, burned within minutes of being identified. The psychological warfare inherent in defensive operations reached its peak as German casualties mounted without corresponding American losses. German tank crews, trained to expect rapid breakthrough and exploitation, found themselves trapped in killing zones where every movement drew immediate fire from invisible enemies. The confidence that had carried them through Poland, France, and Russia evaporated as their most powerful tanks burned around positions they couldn't identify or engage effectively. The destruction of the German spearhead revealed systemic weaknesses in SS tactical training and doctrine that elite status couldn't overcome. Units trained exclusively for breakthrough operations proved incapable of adapting when initial assaults failed against determined resistance. SS Oberfuhrer Mohnke's carefully rehearsed battle plans assumed American forces would collapse under the psychological pressure of facing Germany's most elite troops. When defenders held their ground instead, German commanders discovered they possessed no contingency procedures for sustained combat against prepared positions. The rigidity of German tactical doctrine became a fatal liability when confronted with American defensive flexibility. SS tank crews had practiced specific engagement sequences designed for mobile warfare against retreating enemies. When forced to assault prepared positions defended by troops who refused to withdraw, German training proved inadequate. Tank commanders, accustomed to exploiting breakthrough opportunities, found themselves repeatedly attacking the same defensive positions with predictably devastating results. Communication failures accelerated German tactical collapse throughout the morning engagement. The loss of command vehicles to precisely aimed American fire created coordination breakdowns that paralyzed entire formations. SS Obersturmbannführer Max Hansen, commanding the lead tank battalion, was killed when his King Tiger struck a mine while attempting to outflank American positions. Hansen's death immediately severed coordination between tank and infantry elements, leaving both arms vulnerable to American counterattacks they could have repelled through proper coordination. Subordinate German commanders, trained in the Prussian tradition of following orders rather than exercising independent initiative, became paralyzed when higher headquarters was eliminated. SS tank crews who had operated with supreme confidence under direct leadership found themselves unable to adapt when communication with command elements was severed. The institutional inflexibility that characterized German military culture proved catastrophic when tactical situations demanded rapid adaptation to unexpected circumstances. The mechanical reliability crisis that plagued all German armor reached its devastating peak during the Elsenborn engagement. King Tigers, stressed by the steep terrain and sustained combat operations, suffered breakdown rates that eliminated more tanks than American direct fire. The Maybach HL 230P 30 engine, already overstressed by the tank's 68-ton weight, failed repeatedly under the demands of climbing Elsenborn slopes while maneuvering under fire. Final drive failures immobilized German tanks at critical moments when mobility meant survival. The Tiger II's complex transmission, designed for optimal performance rather than battlefield reliability, proved unable to handle the strain of combat maneuvering on difficult terrain. German crews discovered that their most powerful weapons became death traps when mechanical failures occurred within range of American guns that showed no mercy to disabled enemies. The impossibility of recovering damaged vehicles under constant American observation transformed every mechanical failure into a total loss. German recovery procedures, designed for operations with secure rear areas, proved impossible to execute when American artillery observers could call down devastating fires on any recovery attempt. Disabled King Tigers, representing irreplaceable investments in materiel and training, were abandoned by crews who faced the choice between certain death and tactical withdrawal. German casualties among elite SS personnel proved irreplaceable at this critical stage of the war. The death of experienced tank commanders like Hansen eliminated tactical knowledge that required months to develop and could never be quickly replaced. Each destroyed King Tiger represented not merely the loss of expensive equipment, but the elimination of crew members whose training had consumed scarce fuel and ammunition resources that Germany could no longer afford. The psychological impact on German survivors extended far beyond immediate tactical defeat. Elite troops who had considered themselves invincible discovered they could be systematically destroyed by Americans using tactics and equipment German doctrine considered inferior. This realization, carried back to other German units, undermined the confidence essential for aggressive offensive operations that had characterized German armored warfare since 1939. The failure at Elsenborn Ridge triggered the immediate collapse of the entire northern shoulder of Operation Wacht am Rhein. The inability of Germany's most elite armored division to break through what intelligence had assessed as weak American defenses sent shockwaves throughout the German command structure. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, received reports of the disaster with disbelief that rapidly transformed into desperate attempts to salvage the broader offensive. The strategic implications extended far beyond local tactical defeat. The 1st SS Panzer Division represented approximately 15% of Germany's remaining operational tank strength on the Western Front. The loss of 12 King Tigers and supporting armor in a single morning eliminated irreplaceable resources that German industry could no longer replace. Each destroyed tank represented not merely lost equipment, but vanished training investments, expended fuel allocations, and eliminated crew expertise that had required months to develop. Other German spearheads, dependent on the Northern Shoulder's success for operational security, found themselves exposed to flanking attacks that destroyed their offensive potential. The 5th Panzer Army, advancing through the center of the Ardennes, discovered that American forces, freed by the Northern Shoulder's collapse, could be rapidly redeployed to threatened sectors. What had been conceived as a coordinated three-pronged offensive devolved into isolated attacks that American defenders could defeat in detail. American defensive success at Elsenborn Ridge demonstrated tactical innovations that would fundamentally influence military doctrine for decades. The integration of artillery, armor, and infantry in prepared positions created defensive systems capable of defeating superior attacking forces through coordination rather than individual technical superiority. The concept of channeling enemy attacks into predetermined killing zones became a cornerstone of NATO defensive planning throughout the Cold War era. The psychological warfare aspects of the engagement proved equally influential in military thinking. American forces had demonstrated that determined defenders utilizing superior tactics could break the morale of elite enemy units regardless of their reputation or equipment advantages. The systematic destruction of German confidence through coordinated defensive fires became a template for asymmetric warfare, where numerically inferior forces could achieve decisive victories against technically superior opponents. Intelligence gathered from captured German personnel revealed the depth of strategic desperation that had motivated Operation Wacht am Rhein. SS prisoners, when interrogated according to Geneva Convention protocols, described fuel shortages that limited training, ammunition conservation that reduced gunnery practice, and mechanical problems that kept significant percentages of German armor non-operational even before combat commenced. The commitment of Germany's last operational reserves to an offensive that experienced military professionals privately acknowledged couldn't succeed demonstrated that Nazi leadership had completely lost touch with military reality. The broader strategic situation became clear through prisoner interrogations and captured documents. German forces were collapsing simultaneously on multiple fronts, with Soviet armies approaching German borders from the east, while Allied forces consolidated their positions in the west. The industrial capacity that had sustained German military operations throughout 5 years of warfare had been systematically destroyed by strategic bombing campaigns that eliminated both production facilities and transportation networks essential for military supply. The failure at Elsenborn Ridge represented more than tactical defeat. It symbolized the bankruptcy of German military thinking that had dominated European warfare since Frederick the Great. The emphasis on technical superiority, elite unit performance, and breakthrough tactics had proven inadequate when confronted with systematic American approaches that integrated all combat elements into coordinated defensive operations. The philosophical foundations of German military doctrine crumbled along with the burning king tigers scattered across Belgian snow. The engagement at Elsenborn Ridge validated fundamental principles of American military philosophy that emphasized systematic integration over individual technical superiority. The ability to coordinate multiple weapon systems in real time created combat effectiveness that far exceeded the sum of individual components. Tank destroyers provided precision anti-armor fires, while artillery delivered area suppression that channeled enemy movement. Infantry occupied positions that prevented German troops from closing with American guns, while communication networks enabled instantaneous coordination between all elements. This systematic approach represented a revolutionary departure from traditional military thinking that emphasized individual unit performance and technical specifications. American commanders had recognized that modern warfare required integration across multiple domains simultaneously. Success depended not on possessing the best individual weapons, but on creating weapon systems where each component multiplied the effectiveness of every other element. Training differences between German and American forces proved decisive in determining combat outcomes. While German crews excelled at individual technical tasks within their specialized roles, American defenders demonstrated superior collective effectiveness that enabled adaptation to rapidly changing tactical situations. The institutional flexibility built into American military training systems created forces capable of functioning effectively despite casualties, equipment losses, and unexpected tactical developments. American training doctrine emphasized cross-training that enabled personnel to perform multiple roles within their units. Tank destroyer crews could operate radios, call for artillery support, and coordinate with infantry elements instinctively. This versatility meant that losing individual crew members didn't eliminate unit effectiveness, because remaining personnel could assume additional responsibilities seamlessly. The battle demonstrated that technological superiority couldn't overcome tactical disadvantage when defending forces utilized terrain and preparation effectively. German armor, designed for mobile warfare across open terrain, proved fatally vulnerable when forced to assault prepared positions under conditions their designers never anticipated. The King Tiger's impressive specifications became irrelevant when tactical circumstances negated the advantages those specifications were intended to provide. Terrain analysis revealed how geographic features could multiply defensive advantages when properly integrated with weapons systems. The steep slopes of Elsenborn Ridge forced German tanks to expose vulnerable undersides while climbing, creating engagement opportunities that alert defenders exploited ruthlessly. Dense forest coverage provided concealment for American positions, while channeling German movement into predictable corridors where defensive fires achieved maximum effectiveness. The engagement proved that preparation time could offset material disadvantages through careful planning and tactical innovation. American defenders had studied German armor capabilities extensively, developing specific countermeasures that negated apparent German advantages. They identified optimal engagement ranges, ammunition selection procedures, and displacement techniques that enabled inferior equipment to defeat superior opponents through superior employment. Communication superiority emerged as perhaps the most decisive factor in American victory. The ability to coordinate fires from multiple battery positions, share target information instantly, and adapt to changing tactical situations in real time created overwhelming advantages that German forces couldn't match. When situations developed rapidly, American forces responded faster than German tactical doctrine could adapt, creating decisive engagement windows that determined battle outcomes. The smoking hulks of King Tiger tanks, scattered across Elsenborn Ridge, told a story that German propaganda could never conceal. The Wehrmacht's most elite armored division had shattered against American defensive positions that transformed apparent weakness into devastating strength. SS troops trained to believe in their inherent superiority lay frozen in Belgian snow, victims of American tactical innovation and unshakable determination to hold ground at any cost. The handful of American tank destroyers and Sherman tanks that halted the German spearhead had achieved something far more significant than tactical victory. They had demonstrated that modern warfare belonged not to those with the heaviest armor or most powerful guns, but to those who could integrate all combat elements into coordinated defensive systems that multiplied individual capabilities exponentially. German survivors carried back to their crumbling Reich a truth that no amount of technical superiority could overcome. They had encountered an American military system that turned every apparent disadvantage into tactical advantage through superior preparation, instantaneous communication, and absolute refusal to yield critical terrain regardless of odds. The Battle of Elsenborn Ridge marked the definitive end of German offensive capability and the beginning of final collapse that would culminate in unconditional surrender within 4 months. In the frozen forests of Belgium, a handful of determined Americans had proven that wars are won not by superior individual weapons, but by superior military systems that transform individual courage into collective tactical victory that reshapes the strategic balance of entire campaigns.